And our next guest is Warwick Lightfoot. He's an economist and former Conservative government advisor. Very good afternoon to you, Warwick.
Afternoon, nice to see you.
Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about the economy, because Rachel Reeves was doing a round of media interviews on the Sunday shows yesterday, and she was talking about having come back from Davos, that basically she needs to, get a grip of economic problems in this country. Lots of talk of whether there'd be a third runway at Heathrow, indeed other runways at Gatwick and Luton and elsewhere, and getting the country moving. Is there any evidence at all that that's going to happen?
Well, I'm sorry, it's all going the other direction. It's people laying people off, people worried about jobs, people not spending their savings because they're worried about taxes going up, and it's people preparing for a higher minimum wage, higher national insurance, and every survey of business, consumer, investor, finance director opinion is going the wrong way. Well,
that's the thing, isn't it? Is we're constantly, no, we've steadied the economy, everything's fine, and yet we've got a situation where companies are saying not only are we laying people off, we're going to hire fewer people, we are going to give lower wage increases, and we're kind of just going to sit tight because we just don't trust the economy is going to boom. We've got, high street stores closing down for sale. I mean, it's amazing. You walk along, even Oxford Street in London, I mean, the biggest, famous shopping street in London, and the stores that are popping up on short leases, the sort of sweet stores rather than big stores, department stores, pretty much other than John Lewis, all closed down. It just feels, you can feel the sort of the deterioration. A lot of people might be walking along, barely anyone's got a shopping bag, which I think is always a giveaway. We've now got the likes of James Dyson. So James Dyson, one of our most successful entrepreneurs and inventors, he's accused the Chancellor of vindictiveness by changing inheritance tax rules and said that family businesses employing 14 million people in this country were being fleeced. What do you make of that?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. I mean, the thing isn't just about taxation of businesses and farmers. It's actually having a tax in our tax system that's beyond its sell-by date. Other countries, Sweden, Switzerland, Canada, Australia, and for most people, America, have actually got rid of inheritance tax. And I think it has no place. It's the double taxation of savings income. It's a clumsy thing. It's very salient. People notice it. It gets up people's noses. They don't like it. And it causes a lot of worry. And it is very difficult for a company like the one that James has got to make provision for it and not actually lose a whole lot of their capital stock.
Well, yeah, indeed. It's a very unpopular, people refer to it as death taxes. Now, of course, the tax doesn't fall on the person who's died. The tax falls on usually, the children who are inheriting. Tax doesn't fall on the husband or wife. That's the. But this has definitely come to the fore with the farmers and how that will break up family businesses and how much we rely on those family farms to produce, more than half of our agricultural goods that hit our supermarket shelves that we buy. But I did notice over the weekend, the farmers' demonstrations. They were now calling, a lot of these groups were now calling, for an end to inheritance tax across the board. Nevertheless, that does bring in money. I certainly think that the high rate it's at is self-defeating, because we know the very rich don't pay inheritance tax. Everything's in a trust. It's all dealt with. It's overseas. It's wherever. All completely legally, but they don't actually pay it. So actually, it's successful sort of middle-class families who've got a home, got a big mortgage. They're the ones who end up paying it. You can see where I'm going here with this, But the reality is that this was supposed to be a tax on the very wealthy. The very wealthy don't pay it, but a lot of people who really don't consider themselves very wealthy, who've worked very hard for their money, are paying it. Do you think they should get rid of it altogether, or cut it down to such a level that it's not worth avoiding?
It's time to let go of it. But what I just say is, the problem Rachel Reeves got, she has stabilised the public finances, but how's she done it? She's put up taxes, she's put up borrowing, she's put up spending, and the spending is simply too high to be comfortably financed by the British economy, whichever way you try to do it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
But the issue is, this government has said they don't want to do austerity. They criticised the Cameron and Osborne government for doing that in the 2010s. They can't borrow. Well, they can borrow a bit more. They can't borrow much more because you'll be in proper Liz Truss territory, even which we're already in with the spiralling debt costs. But then they're saying, well, she's saying, they have to balance the books, the fiscal rules. We could look at more tax rises. But as we've seen from the tax rise we've already had from Rachel Reeves pre the budget and indeed in the budget, is that actually she tends to go for the worst ones. I mean, if you're going to raise any tax at all, raising the tax on jobs, national insurance, would be the crazy. I mean, that's the last one you'd do, but that's the first one she did.
Yeah, economists will say she's managed to aggravate the worst deadweight aspects of the tax system.
Yeah.
The national insurance is the worst one. The double taxation of savings is the next one. I think they're going to have to address the spending. And we've got a level of spending now running about 45% of national income. And we know historically the UK economy finds it difficult to finance public spending running more than about 41 to 42% of national income. If you try to sustain that, you burn your fingers.
Yeah, but it's, again, these figures are still absolutely extraordinary. And again, they're talking about tackling, benefit fraud. I think there's extra $4 billion they say they'll save on that. Well, they won't, because we know they won't tackle this issue. Efficiency savings. Tories have been talking about that for the last 14 years as well. We never actually see those efficiency savings. Indeed, we've seen the public sector get bigger in that time. They're not even willing to get people to turn up to their desks in Whitehall. So I'm not quite sure why anyone would have any expectation they can do any of those other things.
But what you're now beginning to see happen is this very high ratio of public spending actively crowding out the private sector. And this is the position we were in 50 years ago. And my own economics tutor published a book with a colleague. It became known as the Bacon-Eltis thesis of crowding out through the public sector being so big that the tax burden undermined the private sector to pay the bill. Yeah. And that's where we are now.
Yeah, and indeed, private sector not being able. For instance, there's a calls for the public sector to be given help, like the NHS and elsewhere, to be given help, extra funding to pay the extra cost of the minimum wage and national insurance employer contributions. But of course, but don't worry, the private sector will be able to take that hit. I mean, and just simply not understanding how things work. I mean, just finally, you worked as an advisor for 3 different chancellors, Nigel Lawson, John Major and Norman Lamont, over a few years. What do you think they would do if they were in charge right now?
I certainly think Nigel Lawson and Norman Lamont would look seriously about cutting spending. I think John Major would have probably gone for a mixture of some cuts to spending and some big increases in tax. Remember, the autumn statement in 1992 had some very big increases in taxation. I think it was a mistake. I think it was a political mistake, and I didn't think it did the economy much good either. But I know that all 3 of them will be very, very concerned about the borrowing. In a funny way, I'm slightly less concerned about the borrowing than some people are, because the key thing is how much you spend. How you finance it is a secondary issue. It's the spending that you're doing.
Well, except, of course, the more you borrow, the more you're spending on interest. You haven't got money to spend on other things. I mean, we spend more servicing the interest on our debt than we do on education and defence and things.
Yes, I mean, the good thing about the borrowing and that debt service charge is that it exposes the real resource cost of the spending.
Right.
Because there is a real cost to spending, and people kid themselves that there isn't.
Yeah.
And when you see the cost of those debts, it tells you in your face that there is one.
Yeah. And again, it's all being paid for by taxpayers now or taxpayers in the future, and it has to be paid for. Warwick Lightfoot, economist, former Conservative government advisor. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much.